The story begins with the protagonist watching the news where a very powerful princess from another kingdom was accepted into the academy he will attend. Our protagonist couldn't care less. Moments after finishing his morning training, when he went to his room, the princess was half naked. She was about to scream, but our protagonist stopped her and started undressing to be equal with the girl, but only worsened the situation. Later, our protagonist named Ikki Kuraudo went to talk to the school director. He wanted to clarify that it was an accident, but he couldn't deny that he started undressing when he saw the girl, so he proposed that he apologize to the girl named Stella Vermilion. She liked Ikki, so she didn't make a scene, but she asked him to leave this world. However, the protagonist found it absurd to go to such extremes over a trivial matter, but she became even more angry when she heard Ikki's words. He told her he couldn't stop staring at her because she was very beautiful, which calmed Stella down, and she even started murmuring. But Ikki wanted to clarify that the room she was in belonged to him, which she didn't believe, but the director ended up clarifying that the room belonged to both of them, and they would be roommates because at the school, companions with similar abilities were assigned. But since no one in the school had skills as good as hers or as bad as Ikki's, they would end up being roommates because of that. Stella didn't agree, but since she had no other choice, she challenged Ikki to a duel, and the winner would decide the rules. Ikki agreed, but Stella also added as a rule that the loser would be the winner's slave and would have to do whatever the winner wanted, no matter how embarrassing it was, for the rest of their life. The protagonist had no choice but to accept, so they would have a duel between blazers. To explain a bit, blazers are people with magic who can summon a magical weapon. Before the battle began, everyone already assumed Stella would win because she was rank F, the lowest rank, and barely had any magic. Only her skill with the sword stood out, unlike Stella who had all her stats at maximum. So when the protagonists started the battle, they both seemed evenly matched with sword technique. But Ikki had the advantage, and when Stella began to use magic, she had an advantage over him, but Ikki used his technique called Itashura to become faster and stronger. Not only did he face her, but he ended up winning the battle. Afterward, although Stella did not receive physical damage, she ended up in the hospital. The director told her that Ikki didn't fare well, as his technique consumed all his mana, and when Stella was already in her room, she found that Ikki was exhausted. She took advantage and started touching him, but ended up waking him up, and when they calmed down, Stella apologized for underestimating him earlier and accepted her defeat. Then she said the most important thing, which was to make Stella his lifelong slave for losing. Stella tried to say it was just a joke and refused to fulfill the deal, but Ikki provoked her by saying that apparently the Vermilion family didn't keep their promises. So Stella agreed to be his slave and was willing to do anything, even more than just being a common slave. But Ikki, who has a good heart, asked her to be his roommate so they could get to know each other better. Stella, although she denied it, liked the idea, so everything ended well, and from here on, the young people began to train together. In another scene, we see how Stella felt embarrassed to drink from the same bottle because it would be an indirect kiss, but she drank it happily. Over time, they even bathed together, at Stella's whim, under the pretext that she was his servant and had to clean him. She also became jealous when a female journalist got close to Ikki. However, the important thing was that they announced the 7-Star Sword Festival, which Ikki couldn't participate in the previous year due to his statistics, and he was repeating the year just for that reason. But now the rules had changed, and this teacher named Yuri reminded them that this year, to earn their place in the Sword Festival, it wouldn't be based on their statistics, but they would have to face each other to earn their place in the festival. And since the matches would be won every 3 days, Ikki was happy because he could only use his technique Itashura once a day. When the teacher tried to cheer the kids up, she ended up spilling blood. Then they introduced the teacher better, and it was thanks to her that they accepted Ikki into the academy. After that, Ikki's sister named Shizuku had arrived at the academy and wanted something more with her brother, as she kissed Ikki out of nowhere, which made Stella angry. But according to Shizuku, it was normal for siblings to kiss when they loved each other so much, But Stella wasn't going to allow that, so things got tense with Shizuku. Shizuku told her that she had nothing to do with Ikki, but Stella publicly confessed that she was Ikki's slave when he had already told her to forget about it. But Shizuku didn't take it well, so they had a brief fight but ended up punished for fighting in school. When they finished, they started insulting each other over Ikki. Shizuku mistakenly said that Stella would never understand Ikki since he had been treated as if he didn't exist. Stella, upon hearing this, went to ask Ikki, who already trusted her, and ended up telling her about the legendary samurai, Ryoma Kurigane, who led Japan in the last World War. That gentleman was Ikki's grandfather, and his family for generations had produced brilliant blazers, but Ikki wasn't cut out for that, so his father treated him as if he didn't exist. Thanks to that, he decided to run away, and when he thought he was going to die, his grandfather Ryoma appeared in front of him and inspired him to be as strong as him. Although he had no talent, Ikki told her that his family didn't like the idea of him standing out in school and pressured the then-director to increase the skill requirements to attend classes, and that's why he failed the year. But now the rules had changed, and he could even participate in the sword festival. Stella felt a bit identified with him, so they would strive to enter the festival together. The next day, the protagonists had the weekend off. Stella wanted to invite Ikki on a date, but Shizuku, being slow, ended up inviting him first, and since Ikki was free, he accepted. The next day, they all arrived at the place, and this is where other young people appear, like Nagi Arijuin, Shizuku's roommate, who also likes Ikki. Later, when they went to the mall, Stella was jealous because of Shizuku, and she was embarrassed when Ikki cleaned her. Stella tried to make him do the same, but she exaggerated, and it didn't work because he would have to go get napkins. The date was going well, but when Ikki and Nagi were in the bathroom, some criminals appeared and started shooting everywhere, but thanks to Nagi's power, nothing happened to them. However, the bad guys took the people in the mall as hostages. Among them were Stella and Shizuku, thinking about what to do, but when this guy was about to kill a child, Stella jumped to save him, but the boss of the guy also appeared. Stella could have won easily, but since they had hostages, it was quite complicated for her to face them. Additionally, the guy threatened Stella to harm the child's mother if she didn't undress. Ikki, who had just arrived at the scene, wouldn't allow it, but Nagi stopped him from worsening the situation, so Stella started undressing. When she was about to remove her bra, Shizuku activated her power to protect the hostages. Then Ikki took action and easily defeated the leader, and the boys took care of the henchmen. When everything was over, Ikki apologized to Stella for not helping her earlier, so everything ended well, or so the boys thought. However, there was a criminal among the hostages who wanted to harm a woman, but a young man named Kirihara appeared to stop her. He wasn't a good guy, so he took all the credit for what happened and used to bother Ikki in the past. When he thanked him for helping them, he just mocked Ikki for his low stats. Additionally, he would be Ikki's first opponent in the selection for entry into the festival, which worried Ikki because Kirihara was a coward who had to attack from afar, making him the worst opponent for Ikki, who couldn't use magic to attack from a distance. On the day of the confrontation, he met a girl named Saikyu who was very powerful and a new instructor. She started flirting with Ikki, but the principal appeared and took her away because she had to commentate on the battle. When the battle was about to begin, the boys were in the arena. Kirihara used his power and turned the entire battlefield in his favor so he could attack Ikki and hide. Ikki was prepared to face him and didn't back down, but Kirihara started hiding his attacks, making them imperceptible and putting Ikki in trouble. While Kirihara attacked Ikki, he told the whole school that Ikki had been given the condition to win the 7-star sword tournament to graduate, which was crazy. So everyone started mocking him, and when the protagonist seemed to be finished, Stella started cheering for him from the stands so he wouldn't give up. Ikki got motivated to win the fight, used his technique, and initiated the counterattack. Despite not being able to see Kirihara's attacks, he had been analyzing his fighting style all the time, so he predicted his attacks before he launched them, taking control of the fight, and in the end, he won the match. But Ikki was weak after the encounter and was taken to the hospital. Then Stella accompanied him until he woke up, and after she got angry for getting very hurt, Ikki confessed his love to her to be his girlfriend, and she, embarrassed and excited, accepted to be his girlfriend. Days later, the boys started winning all their matches, and Ikki had become very popular, and many people asked him to train them, which he accepted. And every time Stella wanted to do boyfriend things with Ikki, Shizuku would arrive to ruin the moment. The youngsters also went to a swimming pool so Ikki could train the boys, and Stella wanted Ikki to see her in a more XXX way, but even though she looked very good, she acted normal, so she got mad at him because she thought he didn't like her anymore. But in reality, he did see her with those eyes, but he didn't want to seem like a pervert. Once things were clarified, they showed that they loved each other, and days later, while doing their normal routine, the youngsters had noticed for some time that a young Ayase Ayatsuji had been watching them, and embarrassed, she fell into the river. Ended up in the infirmary, embarrassed. She was the daughter of a very powerful samurai, although he wasn't well known as he wasn't a blazer. But Ikki admired her father, and she told him that she had been following them to ask Ikki to train her. But as she didn't know how to approach him, she had been following him. Ikki agreed to train her, and when they practiced, he realized that she was very good but lacked something. She was using the same technique as her father, but being a woman, she couldn't exactly imitate her father's techniques. So Ikki suggested that instead of adapting her body to the technique, she adapt the technique to her body. To start, Ikki began correcting her posture, which made her very nervous, but Ikki didn't do it with bad intentions. So there wasn't much of a problem, but once her posture was corrected, Ayase had improved suddenly, so she was very grateful to him. Some time later, while the kids were eating, Ayase was about to tell them about her past when a boy from another school named Kuraudo arrived, and Ayase got nervous. Upon seeing the situation, Ikki asked them to leave, but the guy hit him on the head with a bottle and wanted to fight him. Stella wanted to hit him, but Ikki refused to fight because it would cause problems if they did. So the youngsters left. When they left the place, Ayase apologized for causing them trouble, but Ikki told her that they could count on their help if she had any problems. But when she was about to tell him something, they received a message stating that they would have to face each other in the next match. So Ayase left and started acting strange. She even sent a message to Ikki to meet her on the school roof, which was very likely a trap. Nevertheless, Ikki went. Ayase was desperate to win the match, and as she couldn't defeat Ikki, she used her power to throw herself off the building. Without thinking, Ikki jumped to save her and used Itashura to rescue her. She didn't thank him. She was glad he used his technique because now he couldn't use it against her. Ikki could only use his technique once a day, so she almost had the dual one with a trick. Ikki ended up exhausted after his technique. Even when Stella fantasized about him, Ikki lost consciousness on top of her due to exhaustion. She thought it was her chance, but when she realized how bad Ikki was, she took him to the hospital. When he woke up, the director arrived with him, so he would assume responsibility for what happened to the building, and he wouldn't accuse Ayase of cheating. But the director already had an idea of what had happened, so she told him Ayase's story. Kuraudo arrived one day at Ayase's father's dojo and defeated him, leaving him in a coma, and took over his dojo. Ayase tried to reclaim the dojo but couldn't, so she was desperate to win the battle to regain what she had lost. The combat between them began. Ayase wasn't remorseful for what she had done, so she would start the battle. At first, it was an even fight, but Ayase used her technique, but it was a trick as she had used her technique in the arena the day before to have even more advantage, which was illegal. So she tried not to be caught, but Ikki knew she would do something like that, and he had already spoken to the teacher not to disqualify Ayase for that. In the end, Ikki launched himself against her, and after a long battle, Ikki ended up winning. Ayase ended up frustrated by her weakness and for cheating, but despite everything she had done to him, he would help her regain what she had lost. So Ayase was grateful to him. The next day, they went to the dojo to challenge Kuraudo to a duel for the dojo. He accepted the duel and drew his weapon, which was very dangerous, but Ikki was not intimidated and faced the villain. But in the midst of the battle, Ikki realized that the young man had instant reaction speed, which allowed him to counterattack instantly. The young man was surprised that Ikki discovered this, but even though he knew, he couldn't do anything about it, and as the fight continued, both were happy to have a good fight. However, as the fight dragged on, the young man grew tired of launching attacks, so both launched a final attack, but Ikki performed Ayase's father's secret technique and ended up winning the battle. In the end, the young man accepted his defeat, allowing the dojo to return to Ayase's family. She was very grateful, and shortly after, her father woke up from the coma. Days later, the director sent the protagonists on a trip since they were undefeated in their fights, so they would have a vacation alone, or so they thought, but in reality, they were sent with the student council to help clean up the place. While cleaning, they met a young man named Misogi, who was the vice president, and Kanata, in charge of accounting. They also met a young girl named Renren, who was a cat girl and a giant. After they finished, the kids went alone to the river to have fun, but on the way, Stella got sick, and it started raining. So they ended up in a cabin they found, and to dry off, they took off their clothes, and as Stella couldn't do it herself, Ikki helped her, which lifted her spirits, understandable. Stella proposed to have more intimacy right there, but Ikki refused because he respected her and wanted the relationship to be serious and not rushed. When things calmed down, Ikki heard a noise, so he went to investigate, but out of nowhere, a golem attacked the house. Ikki reacted quickly and saved Stella, who was too sick to help. So Ikki faced the golem alone, but no matter how much he destroyed it, it kept multiplying, making it impossible for Ikki to face so many, and when Stella was in trouble, the student council members arrived to help them. However, they couldn't defeat the golem. Then the student council president arrived. She stopped the golems without pause until she used her special technique. The one controlling the golem from afar received the damage. The president was the strongest and was among the top 4 last year. When the protagonists returned home, they could hardly speak to the president, and Shizuku had to face her in the elections, so they were worried about her. Even Stella was concerned, but Shizuku was not intimidated. When the battle between Shizuku and the president, named Touka, began, both were aware of how powerful their opponent was. When the fight started, Shizuku went on the offensive, attacking Touka non-stop, and Shizuku tried not to get close, because if she did, she would be lost. Then she attacked her with ice, with a water barrage, even with water clones, but nothing stopped Touka. Despite almost losing, Shizuku didn't give up and tried everything, making it the best fight of this work. When Shizuku had the advantage, Touka applied her best technique and won. Later, in the infirmary, Shizuku was sad, but she had the support of the young people, especially Nagi, who understood her perfectly. Days later, after Ikki and Stella achieved more victories, they were together with the goal of entering the sword festival together and having a very advanced relationship, but they always had certain admirers. Days later, they went to meet Touka, and it turns out she was actually quite clumsy and serious about work, but despite being very skilled in combat, she was kind and enjoyed taking care of children. So everyone had a wonderful day until the kids returned to school because a scandal erupted when it was discovered that the young ones were dating, as Stella was a princess and Ikki was considered the worst student. Then a young man who worked for Ikki's family arrived to worsen the situation as he would interrogate Ikki about his relationship with Stella. She denied it, but Ikki agreed to prove that he was not guilty of anything. And from there Ikki had a tough time as the old man and another person interrogated him in an attempt to make him confess that he had been in a relationship with Stella even though it wasn't true. Since they couldn't defame Ikki, they had him locked up for weeks, and while the kids were worried about him, unlike the others, he had to face his opponents in prison. The only consolation he had was the support of Professor Ayase and Stella's support, in addition to Ikki's father who knew what they were doing but did nothing, and to him, Ikki was ashamed despite all he had achieved because for him, a weak person was destined to be weak for life, so he wanted Ikki to give up the tournament. But Ikki, despite his emotional and physical state, continued to win all his matches. Then the old man altered Ikki's last match so that he would face Touka, and if he won, they would leave him alone, but if he lost, he would have to give up being a magic knight. Shizuku went to talk about the situation with Touka, and she felt bad for Ikki, but she didn't intend to go easy on him and would confront him with all her strength. So, to avoid harming Ikki, she asked Shizuku to convince Ikki to withdraw from the fight. The next day, when everyone had their final fights, it was Ikki's turn against Touka. Ikki was late because the evil old man, besides imprisoning Ikki and keeping him in terrible conditions, did not take him to the event. So Ikki was tired as he entered the arena, and when he thought he wouldn't make it, Shizuku arrived to support him. Not only she supported him, but the whole school did, especially Stella, who had already qualified and asked Ikki to fulfill the promise of qualifying together. And when the time for the fight came, Touka had a great advantage over Ikki, but she didn't intend to hold back, and Ikki was not willing to lose either, so from the beginning, they both went for their most powerful attack, which would decide the winner. And when they struck, Ikki emerged victorious, and although he would normally have lost, the experts realized that Ikki surpassed his limits at the last moment. The old man was not pleased with the result and tried to attack Ikki, but Stella hit him and went to congratulate Ikki. In such an emotional moment, she asked him to be his wife, to which Stella agreed. After the elections, they announced who the 6 representatives of the school would be, and Ikki was chosen to lead that group in the Seven Swords Festival, thus ending the anime. And that's the end of the summary of this wonderful anime. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button, as it helps and motivates me to keep creating more content for you. See you soon.